everybody. Welcome to Witchcraft and Voodoo with me, Lilith Dorsey, and my co-host, Sable Aradia. Yay!
Hello!
We're finally back. Our first new return episode aired today, and I wanted to tell you, Sable, it's getting a lot of whatever hits and play, and a lot of good thumbs up from people, and I'm really happy about that.
That's awesome. That's really cool to hear. Hey, that gives me an opportunity to tell our viewers, we ran into some weird problems when we were trying to redo this. I added to our original playlist that was on my YouTube channel, and all of a sudden it stopped linking to my playlist on, because you put these things in your end screens and, those little banners across the top they call cards, right? So I was linking to the playlist in a bunch of my other witchcraft videos, and it worked fine. And then a couple days later, it just stopped. And I'm like, well, okay, so damn, there's a bug. So I reported it, and then I created an entirely new playlist and replaced all my links. And I put the other one on private, and it worked just fine. And then 2 days later, the same thing happened. So I can only assume that somebody at YouTube must be blocking it. But the problem with that is that I don't know why. They haven't sent me any emails. I don't have any notice that I've broken any, community guidelines. So I'd just like to let our viewers know about that. And maybe they want to contact YouTube, because they sure as hell aren't listening to me. So what we've decided to do is we're collaborating on Lilith's playlist on her channel, but it's got its own errors. If you look at the full playlist, you'll see that the videos are out of order. I'm not sure that's a big deal, because these tend to be very self-contained, but occasionally we do refer to other episodes. So if that matters to you, if you're going to watch the playlist through, just pay attention to what episode number you're on, is my advice, and we'll try to fix it as soon as we can.
Yeah, I mean, I know we had that one, the deities, that was part 1 and part 2. So people should definitely pay attention and make sure they watch part 1 before they watch part 2. So, but yeah, we've had so many problems. Yes. Yeah. It's terrible. It's terrible. But yeah, go and report that, and please like us and comment and all of that, because we're going to be running out of topics soon too. So.
Yeah, that's right. Let us know what you want to hear about, right? That's the whole purpose, is conversation with our viewers. So yeah, what do you want to know? Tell us in the comments.
I know. This will be great. So tonight we do have a topic, though. Hooray. Tonight's topic is cultural appropriation. It's something I've been talking a lot about lately. I've been doing workshops and community forums about cultural appropriation. And I think we're finally at the point now in society where we can really see these things for what they are and address it, so people who are trying to be mindful and trying to be, advocates for marginalized communities or people of color or whoever's, historically been appropriated from, can, really do things the right way without being offensive or disrespectful or any of that. And I think, having the conversations are really important. So that's why I'm so glad that we can address it here on our Witchcraft and Voodoo series, because it is something that comes up in my tradition and in your tradition a lot. So yeah, that's what I want to say to begin with. I got a lot of examples, but I'll let you give your intro for it now, Sable.
I don't know, right? In this particular case, I feel that I'm on much shakier ground than you. Wicca gets a lot of criticism, and some of it is quite justified, about cultural appropriation. But then again, okay, and I guess I'll give a little bit of history. It's because, in part, what we call Wicca now comes from the Western occult tradition. And one of the big groups in the Western occult tradition was a group called the Theosophists. And those guys were like the textbook example of imperial British and European types proclaiming that their understanding of other cultures was accurate and interpreting it in their own way and pretending that that's what it was. Right, so those ideas have influenced modern Wicca, and I think that it's a good time to consider untangling it. So that's the perspective I'm coming at it from. But there's also the, in some cases, I don't think the criticism is justified. I think that Okay, for example, there's a large number of, there's a proper name for them, and for some reason I can't remember it. I apologize. But there's a faction among Greek Reconstructionists, right, who are very much, well, you can't use the Greek gods at all because they're ours. And my answer to that is, dude, your culture has exactly as much to do with Athena as mine. So I don't really think you have a right to say anything there. You know, and the same thing happens from Norse tradition and Celtic tradition. There's a hardcore group who are just, well, Wicca shouldn't use anything, right? And sorry, boys, that's not going to happen, and girls, you know. So, you know, I want to be respectful, and I'm sure most of us do. But anyway, that's going to segue into another topic, but I'll get back to it, right?
Okay.
Because, yeah, we'll be there a while. So, go ahead. What are your thoughts? How do you feel about this? Where do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, I want to start by saying I really did not think it would get to this extreme. You know, we've both been doing this a really long time. And I think that when I started, you know, part of it was really because I wanted to both professionally and academically and spiritually, like, provide accurate information about my religion, which, you know, for those of you who aren't used to watching it, you know, I'm a New Orleans style voodoo priestess here in New York City. I also have initiations in Haitian Voodoo and in Lukumi, or Santeria as it's more commonly known. And I've also practiced a lot of hoodoo and come across a lot of those people. So, you know, I mean, just as an example, I was getting interviewed by somebody and I explained to her, this is the difference between hoodoo and voodoo, or New Orleans style voodoo. And she just said, at the end of this long, lengthy explanation I'd given her, she said, oh, well, then everybody should just do hoodoo because it's a lot easier and there are less rules and you don't really have to worry about where you're taking stuff from. And I was like, no, that's not what I was saying at all. What I was saying is you should approach it respectfully and you should approach it honorably. And if you want real power and to be able to create real change, then the systems that have more study are going to be much more successful than something you just took from some other culture and you've decided to use it in whatever way fits for you. You know, it's like, you know, if I'm in Britain, I spend a lot of time in Britain. If I'm in Britain and I have one of those weird plugs and I bring it home and I try and plug it in here at home in New York, something's going to blow up. It's not the same plug. It's not the same thing. It's not designed for the same system. And even though if I'm in Britain, I might be able to use it, if I have friends who can show me how to use it, it's not going to work here in the US without some serious modification, and it could be dangerous. And I think it's the same kind of thing, because you're taking things that you don't know what the whole history of it is. And I think African traditional religions, all these ones that I've mentioned, are different because we have a long continuous history. It's not like a lot of the European traditions or some of the other traditions where they weren't as popular as they are today. So there's a lot of reconstructionism going on because a lot of that information was lost. I feel like this is more of a continuous tradition. So if you want to go back and talk to the right people and do the right things, it's not easy, but it's easier than some of the other things that we're discussing here today.
That's cool. I really like the metaphor with the, you know, different types of plugins and whatnot. That makes a lot of sense to me. I'll share a personal story actually that directly relates to what you're talking about. Now, my husband and I had some interesting fortuitous spiritual connections, you know, personal gnosis, right, with some of the associated loa from voodoo tradition at a couple of points. For a while, I was really trying to get serious about working with them. And I found that there were a lot of things where it didn't quite work. I felt either the way I was communicating was not something they were understanding, or that I had inadvertently done something awry, right? So I decided after some time to, you know, continue to make sort of a passive, respectful sort of thing. Like I've got an altar to Baron Samedi in my house, right? But I'm not doing anything more than that until I know more about how they are traditionally approached, look to the right people to, you know, teach me what I need to know. right? So that's kind of where I'm at. I had this encounter and I backed off because I felt that I wasn't approaching it properly. I think that that's probably in general a good way to handle things. If you're looking, okay, so Wicca uses, that's the wrong word. Okay, sometimes they do, and that's not cool, but we interact with deities or variations of deities from a bunch of different cultures, mostly European, but there's others as well, right? And you know, I think that it's a good thing to keep in mind that if you're talking to, I don't know, Bridget, right? You're not communicating with her in the same way that the Celts were. So to try to claim that this is a traditional, you know, like a continuous Celtic tradition is nonsense, right? And I think that you have to be aware, like I personally believe that deities will show themselves to different people in different ways. There's no, you know, one version, right? But, you know, you're still connected to that overall whole. I like to caution people that Lilith, okay, Lilith is a good example, you know, being, I mean, she's an ancient goddess and she's come to symbolize feminism in the modern culture to a lot of pagans, but she is also connected to the demoness that the Hebrews were afraid of. And that's there, that's part of her, right? She's, you know, the one who eats babies.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you're going to deal with her, you've got to be aware of that. And if that's not what you're trying to reach to, I mean, maybe it is, right? Some people reach out to her as a vengeful spirit for wrongs done. And we can get into that in the next episode, which is going to be ethics. And that's cool. But, you know, like you have to be aware of that too, right? So I think it's best to consider that you're a modern person in a modern culture, be it, in my case, Canada, right? So a modern Canadian from Canadian culture approaching a modern understanding of these deities. And some of them are more open to it. Like if you believe in, I don't know, not every pagan, of course, believes in an actual presence of deities. We believe it's more psychology. But I'm not one of, okay, I don't know. The jury's out. The jury's out for me. I like to say yes and yes and is fine in Wicca a lot, right? So I feel that a lot of them are more open to new ways of doing things than others are. So, you know, if you're getting a yes and this is cool, go for it, right? And if you're not, well then, you know, maybe you need to figure out a more traditional way of approaching them, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I think that that's part of the reason that for our tradition that there is, how do I say this? I was just talking to my mother about, you know, all this intuitive magic, you know, that's going on lately, you know what I mean? And I think for our system, you know, yes, I could think it was a good idea, but it's not just my own self determining that. There's a long lineage, you know what I mean? I'll call my priestess and tell her I'm doing that, or I'll call a friend of mine who's a babalawo and tell him I'm doing that, you know, and then I get a reaction from them and I listen to it because they're elders in the tradition that I'm in. And even if it's something I want to do, I can't do it if they say it's not a good idea to do it because I know what will happen. It'll have negative consequences. So there is a system in place that will, you know, and there's a system in place for all of it. You know, I had one person tell me that they were throwing all their stuff into the river for the, you know, Orisha Oshun because they wanted to get, you know, a lover or whatever they wanted. I don't even know. But I said, well, who told you to do that? Who told you to throw hundreds of dollars of jewelry and stuff into the river? Like that's not how she's used to being given offerings. You don't know. I mean, you didn't have a reading to see what she wanted or if it was possible or if this was best for you. None of that. You just took it upon yourself to throw all this stuff in the river. And that's quite frankly, quite stupid as far as I'm concerned. I just feel like that's ridiculous. And that's where I think a lot of these, you know, intuitive magicians go wrong, because there is no system of checks except themselves. And even if it works for you, that's great. But then you can't turn around, which is my other point with cultural appropriation. You can't turn around and then sell that to somebody else. You can't turn around and teach it to somebody else, because you don't know how it's going to work for somebody else or for the next 100 people you meet. So that's why we have these systems in place. You know, this is why we have these checks and balances. And I think if you're really turning it into, you know, something like, here, I brought a prop. This is my little voodoo doll. That's ridiculous. If you're turning it into something that's just to make money, you know, then what are you doing? You know, who did you talk to about it? Who did you ask if this was appropriate? You know, I got interviewed about voodoo donuts a little while ago by Wild Hunt, you know, and then I did want to mention this. A friend of mine sent me this movie. Now, as a movie, it was great. It was a cross between Macbeth, that Scottish play, and voodoo. So I was like, okay, this sounds interesting. A voodoo Macbeth, let's check this out. And the witches are supposed to be voodoo practitioners. And they start out with a veve, and they start out with ritual clothes and do this whole little voodoo ritual. And I was like, in this, you know, Macbeth castle kind of thing. And I was just like, well, but who did this guy, you know, it was the director I was talking to. So I was like, but who did you contact about, did you do this respectfully? Did you do it accurately? Did you do it the right way? Is it something that's even okay to do? And he was like, I didn't consult anybody. And I'm like, well, but that's where we have to stop doing things like this and start asking different questions. You know, I'm out there, there's hundreds of other voodoo people. We don't have to be in the closet. There's hundreds of other witches out there. You know, you don't have to make stuff up because you don't know and then contribute to the stereotype and then sell it. That's just, it's just wrong to me.
Thank you for bringing that one up. See, in that particular situation, yeah, okay, we're more like the appropriated group. And, you know, when you're dealing with, say, I don't know, it's okay, yeah. Movies, TV shows, they piss me off, right? They piss me off so bad because they learn, you know, they go to somebody's beginner Wicca site, right? And they learn the basics of how a circle is cast, right? And theoretically, right? And then they have all the little actors do it, and they inevitably screw something up. And then, of course, you know, the demon shows up or whatever bad nasty that's supposed to punish you for doing witchcraft because, you know, right? I mean, come on, right? How about you ask an actual witch how it actually works? This is a real problem right now. I'm an indie fiction writer. I see it a lot in indie paranormal romance in particular. You're pissing us off, dude. Right? I'm here. You can talk to me. I'm real easy to find on social media. I will answer your questions. I don't mind. Please come and talk to me and get it right before you try to put it in your fiction, you know? And yeah, you know, okay, voodoo dolls, right? I noticed you posted an article about that today.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so these so-called voodoo dolls, right? I don't really, I'm sure they're not traditional. Go read Lilith's article, right? I didn't have time to do more than skim it today, but I'm going to read it. This is probably closer to us witchcraft types. We do use little dolls occasionally,
yes,
right? We call them poppets, and they're generally for healing magic that you have to do at a distance. We don't tend to stick pins in little dolls much. We're not, you know, that's, we'll get into that in the next episode as to why we don't do that. But yeah, mostly it's for distance healing. Right? And so, yeah, that's getting, I mean, it's a trope now, right? People refer to, you know, voodoo dolls as this, you know, oh yeah, she's got a voodoo doll of me. Oh, you know, she hates you that much, does she? You know, come on. Like, it's 2018. The internet is a thing. There's no reason why you can't, you know, you can't ask people.
No, definitely. I mean, and I think there's a lot of companies out there selling them and things like that. But you're right. It does have its roots in, you know, Celtic magic and puppets and things like that. There is one instance in Nigeria where they'll do dolls for, like, if you're a twin and your twin passes, then they'll make a doll of that twin for the person to carry with throughout their life. So it's like they're not still missing the twin. They have a
Beautiful.
representation. And then there's also in South Africa, I did meet a Sangoma who told me that they use them for healing as well, in the sense of, you know, if my client is 100 miles away and I can't heal them, I'll make a puppet of them and use that as a stand-in for my client, because I can't, you know, I can't rub herbs on my client all the time because they're 100 miles away. So I'll rub herbs on the puppet, or I'll put it with, he said he used to put a lot of stuff with the cows. I guess they put stuff with cows. So that's what would happen. It would go sleep with the cows and then it would come back and it would be healed. So, but yeah, it's something that people have turned into, you know, just make a quick dollar out of this. You know, you go to New Orleans, you see it everywhere. You see it online everywhere, you know. And I mean, you can, again, as I said, use it as a sort of a spirit ancestor doll, but that's something completely different than what these people are talking about. And I think it really is disrespectful, like I said, because what are you doing? Are you taking, and that's the way I feel with a lot of these people who I do feel like, yes, you are culturally appropriating, but if you kept that in your living room, that would be fine. When you write a book about it and then you're trying to sell it to other people, and what you're telling them is wrong and not necessarily based in tradition or culture or anything like that, then who are you taking it away from? It's just, it's not fair. I mean, this stuff was, unfortunately, I had a friend say to me, which I thought was a little privileged. He's not going to watch this, so I can say it. But he was like, I think we should thank all those Europeans for writing everything down, because a lot of this stuff came from oral traditions and it wasn't written down. And I was like, well, but that's because they were colonialized and oppressed and enslaved and marginalized, and, you know, their books were taken away and they couldn't gather in groups. And of course they didn't write stuff down, you know? So yes, if we do have stuff written down by those, you know, evil overlord colonizers, that was, you know, most of Europe. But I think that we need to try and change that, you know, we really do.
If anybody wants to change their colonialized history that we've all been taught in school, then I want you to go to an account called Medieval POC on Twitter. It's at Medieval POC, right? People of color have been actively involved in European culture as we understand it since there was the Middle Ages, and they were Romans before that. The Romans did not look at, they didn't care about race the way we do, right? Which is stupid. But, you know, they didn't care about that. They cared about, okay, well, you know, are you going to follow Roman laws? Are you going to, you know, swear an oath to whoever's in charge right now? Are you going to speak Latin, right? That's what they cared about. So, you know, like, and the idea that, okay, yeah, the idea that it isn't a written language. No, that's because it was the oral traditions were suppressed from being written. Absolutely, right? Like, there are rich, involved, intense African cultures that have been there a lot longer than any Western European culture I know. They were complex people. They had empires. They had, you know, they had advanced civilizations. Like, you know, learn some bloody history, please, you know, if you're gonna weigh in on that.
I'm laughing because he was a medieval history major, but yes.
Oh my God, really? Oh.
I know.
What are you doing? Ah, okay.
I know, it's so funny. But yes, no, I think that's it. And like I said, I think people need to just sort of, you know, I had one person tell me once that I'm wearing my alikes, which are my ritual necklaces. I had somebody who was teaching them at an event in here on the East Coast. And he said to me, well, I have to teach it because there's nobody else teaching it. And I was like, well, first of all, you know, if somebody from the community doesn't want to come and teach it, then maybe it doesn't need to be taught there. You know what I mean? Maybe I've talked to a lot of people of color who don't necessarily feel welcome in some of the, you know, larger pagan gatherings. And I think what people should do if they want to help is do things to make them more welcoming, as opposed to taking something and then trying to teach it when you don't necessarily know what you're doing. I mean, this guy, I don't know where he is now, but he ran into my workshop in the middle and goes, what's the number for Babalu Aye? I got to do the beads for it. And I'm like, if you don't even know the ritual numbers of what you're doing, then this is not what you're supposed to be doing with these people. This is not at all. And again, charging for it and doing all of that stuff, it's just not right. It's not right. You know, I mean, there's a history, there's a meaning, there's a purpose, there's time and energy and effort and bunch of money that went into getting these beads. They're not just pretty beads that are on my neck, you know. So that's a whole nother story, but that's just what it is, you know, and people need to respect that. The same way, you know, you wouldn't run up and touch somebody's baby. Well, don't run up and touch somebody's necklaces. And alternatively, as for this conversation, don't run out and sell them to somebody else, like you know what you're doing.
Yeah, I can't believe the audacity of that. I think that, okay, so why does this happen? This happens a lot in the pagan community, in my opinion, because we are not very good with boundaries. And we never have been, right? We're so eager to welcome everybody, which is good. That's a good thing, right? And not criticize each other that we don't use our discernment either. And we don't say, no, this is not okay. And there's a lot of areas where we need to do that, right? One of the reasons why I contributed to the anthology Pagan Consent Culture was because sexuality is one of those things where we don't have good boundaries. People think, oh, well, okay, they believe in sacred sexuality. They're not monogamous. In some cases, I'm not monogamous. I am polyamorous, right? So they think, oh, well, she'll just screw anybody, right?
Right.
No, I won't. And if you come to me with that attitude, I guarantee you have no hope. You know, why don't you wait for me to ask you? You know, like,
Yeah.
you know, and you know, it's ripe for abusers of all kinds if we don't set boundaries. And this is one of those areas where we do need to set boundaries. The pagan community is, I don't know, I think it was, let's see, I don't remember who said it in our community, but like I went to an event in Vancouver like 10, maybe 12 years ago even, right? And he was speaking about this derisively, so don't think he approved or anything, right? But what he said was, yeah, the pagan community is one of the few places where you go and you still expect to see all white people, you know, and that's not good. That's not a good thing. Why is there only white people? Why is this not a more welcoming space? This is, you know, I mean, obviously there's people like yourself, you know, who are totally willing to teach, right? The Afro-Caribbean traditions. And, you know, why are we pretending that we know about it and then trying to teach each other little bits? That's, you know, that's, in addition to being rude and offensive and, you know, all that, it's also dangerous because you're not teaching people the right information. If I'm going to pay for a class, I want the right information. I want somebody who knows what the hell they're talking about. So why would you do that, you know? And
no, I think you're right. I mean, I think we as festival participants have to ask the question, but I also think, you know, I've had organizers tell me they don't have the time or the energy to vet people, you know, and I think that, you know, even, you know, you and I both have published books. I think that even in publishing, they don't vet people the way they did 20 years ago. You know what I mean? You can show up, and if you got a lot of social media followers or something, you know, that's enough to get you at least heard. And then if they think it's going to sell, then that's it, that they're not asking these questions about, you know, does this person have a strong tradition? Are they educated? Have they studied this? Are they doing things responsibly? They're not asking these questions at all. And I think we really should, everybody all the way along should ask these questions. You know, I was in an anthology with Crystal Blanton called Bringing Race to the Table, and we did a lot of conversations with some of the other women in there. And a lot of the people of color that were in there were saying they didn't feel welcome at pagan events, you know, and I think that, you know, watching your culture be appropriated, and in a lot of ways it even seems like it's mocking, you know, because it's not done respectfully, it's done really lousily, you know. And to go back to an example, if I'm not going to call anybody out individually, but I did see something on TV where someone was smudging the place with a cigarette. He's running around with this is who they hired in a reality TV show. He's smudging it with a cigarette, like, and I'm a smoker, but like this had to be the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen, like in a Native American way, you know, with ritual tobacco in his cigarette with a filter. I think it was a Winston. But, you know, come on. Like, that's just not how we do these things, you know? So I think that people who are media producers have to think. I think people who are event organizers have to really think. I think book publishers really have to ask these questions, you know? And we also, as consumers, have to be responsible and realize, okay, am I giving my money to somebody who knows what they're talking about and is really trying on making a difference and doing something responsibly and respectfully, or am I giving it to somebody who looks like a kook? Because what I see is like the person who looks like a fruitcake kook often gets the money because it's entertaining and people think this is what it's about. You know, I had a friend that used to hit people with a chicken, you know. Like, she used to make a lot of money hitting people with a rubber chicken.
Okay, then.
But yeah, that's, I mean, what are we doing here? Seriously. Yeah, yeah.
No, you're right about that. The colorful, kooky looking people do tend to be the ones that get more attention. I found that out myself, right? Like, okay, so yeah. Okay, I'm gonna get in trouble for this, but I'm gonna do it anyway.
Okay.
Right? I had a metaphysical store for 7 years, right? And my intention was, you know, I'm going to create it. This is a place for, you know, pagans and magical people, and you can come here and, you know, I'll tell you what herb would be appropriate, and I'll give you some, you know, I offer classes. I had other people in to offer classes. We had a Tibetan Buddhist Lama who was in giving classes, you know, like we, you know, it was, you know, real stuff. Like, that was my intention. This is the real stuff, you know. And I struggled the whole time, right? Well, in the meantime, right, there's facts that come into play in the broader metaphysical community. And I'm not talking about just the pagan community at this point. I'm talking New Age and all that, right? You know, this year it's Orgone generators, and the year after that it's Zen wands, which, if that isn't a enormous example of cultural appropriation, it's most ridiculous, I don't know what is, right? And, you know, and this magical new wonderful product will just take care of all the stuff, and we're going to charge thousands of dollars for it, and thousands of dollars for the classes to learn how to use it, which is total bullshit we made up off the top of our heads based on a few things we read vaguely in a book once, you know. And people will pay this stuff. They'll pay thousands of dollars for this, you know, colorful nonsense, right? But I couldn't get 20 bucks out of people for a practical magic class, you know? So, and it pisses me off and it frustrates me. And I wish people would just stop that nonsense, because there really is real information out there. And it's actually very interesting if you want to spend the time studying it. You know, Wicca's not new. We've been around for 50 years now, at least. 60, right? It's been 10 years since that 50 years of Wicca book came out. So, you know, and the occult tradition that it draws upon is older than that, and there are elements that are older from European folk magic and folk traditions here and there, and I think we can reasonably say that. So, you know, we're not just making shit up as we go along anymore. But again, part of the problem is that we don't, you know, we're trying to be so accommodating, and
right.
Wiccans and pagans, you know, Wiccan type pagans, right, I guess, right, don't tend to give a lot of credit to authority, right? Most of us are solitary practitioners who picked up something out of, you know, books in the store, which is fine. I don't have anything against that. That's a good place to start. I can recommend some books if, you know, you're one of those people, you're just getting into it. But, you know, they say, you know, someone, okay, right, like, I'm Lady Sable Aradia, right? I'm a 3rd degree initiate in 2 traditions. And people think I'm putting on airs, right? For using that, for saying Lady Sable Aradia. I'm not putting on airs. This is a title, right? Like, you know, Father John, right?
Yeah.
That's all it is. It means that I'm a priestess in this tradition, and I've studied it a long time, right? And I'm qualified to teach it. That's it, right? You know, you can... If you don't want to take my advice, fine, right? But, you know, don't pretend that it doesn't have any value, because I know it does, right? And I'm sure you run into the same thing all the time.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was saying about the woman saying, why doesn't everybody just run out and do hoodoo? You know what I mean? Because then they can just get some herbs and sprinkle it around. And, you know, we'll talk more about this with the ethics thing, but I think that there definitely is ethical problem with that, because you're not doing the other spiritual things that you need to be doing to evolve as a whole person and to really make yourself and the situation and the community around you better. And that's what's missing. You know what I mean? It's not about shortcuts. And I think that that's what a lot of people are about these days. You know, a lot of people they want to have a quick fix, you know, or they just want to light a candle or do something, you know, they don't want to know the reason behind it or other things like that. And that's not going to work for everybody. You know, I had my godson lost his wallet on the way home from my house this weekend. And I said to him, I said, well, did you have any protection on your wallet? And he said, well, I had a rune in it. And I said, well, who told you to put a rune in it? You know what I mean? We're an African traditional house. I'm not saying I don't use runes. I have used runes, but why are you using a rune? Like, why did you think this was a good idea? I have nothing against them, but not a rune on somebody's wallet is not going to work for everybody, you know? And if you want to protect yourself, just because you read it in a book or you heard somebody else did it and it worked, it might not work for you, you know? That's why I say we've got to check these things. We've got to do divination. We've got to consult our elders, especially when it's something important, like protecting your money or protecting your home or your health or those things, you know? So a little teeny candle and what you found on Pinterest is, I love Pinterest, but that's not going to be enough, you know?
Yeah, I agree with you there, right? And I mean, okay, you know, some things are simple, some things can be, right? But you know, if you, I don't know, right? Like, yeah, there's people who know what they're doing and they're willing to share this information, right? And we diss them a lot in our community, right?
Yeah.
Like, I felt dissed a lot, right? One of the reasons why I've been quiet and haven't been doing a lot over my channel over the past 3 years is because I had a couple of bad experiences in my own community and where I felt very dissed. And I'm, you know, for a while I was like, well, fine, you know, I'm going to go take my ball and go home, right? And I think that if you do that often enough to people who are, you know, who have beta study and who are trying to teach what they know because people have asked, right? Then, I mean, you know, we keep saying in the pagan community, well, where are all the elders, right? I'll tell you where they are. They're pissed off with you, right? Because you were rude and they went home. They're done with, you know, students who say, oh, I want to listen and I want to learn. And then, you know, start arguing with them or don't do the homework they're assigned or whatever it is, right? Like,
Sure.
You know, if you're gonna pay for a class in college, the professor is not obligated to give you your graduation grade, right? You have to work. And if you're not willing to work, why are you there? You don't have to do it that way, right? Not in Wicca anyway. There's, we discussed that briefly. No, wait, no, we didn't. This was something else I did recently. But I said on a recent radio show I was on that, you know, you don't have to get initiation to be a Wiccan. There's lay Wiccans. That's fine, right? But if you want to get involved in, you know, if you're like, okay, I'm a Wiccan priestess, I take that responsibility seriously and I want to do something with that, right? Get some teaching from some people who are, you know, ideally have initiations or come from a place where they do a lot of teaching, like say witch camp, right? You know, do that kind of stuff. Learn from people who know, and you know, like it's not a Girl Scout badge. You know, it's a job,
Yeah.
right?
No, it's true. It's true. It is, you know, and I think, yeah, we certainly have a system and people you can study with, and it's hard because finding somebody who's genuine is going to be hard, you know, and I think that it's got to be finding somebody you trust and somebody who's not culturally appropriating or making stuff up or just whatever. So you're really going to have to do your homework, you know. I mean, I think I'm honestly really blessed to have the god kids that I have, you know, because a lot of them, I think they chose me because, you know, I think 4 of them went to NYU and I went to NYU. I'm like, this is great. We should have known each other when we were in school, you know, but we're all like crazy educated and we just love to learn, and we love to learn lots of different things and really investigate things and also be practical. You know, a lot of them are very hands-on, and I think that that's another thing that people don't realize with this cultural appropriation. Just because you read a book about it, you know, you don't necessarily know what's going on with it. You don't necessarily know how to reproduce those elements. And I think that that's another danger in appropriation, because if you haven't, it's like cooking. Again, here's my other analogy. It's like cooking. If you've never made something and then you open up the thing and try and make the recipe, it's going to taste like crap. You're probably going to do everything wrong because you've never done it before. But by the time you've done it 300 times, then you can throw away the book. You can start to improvise with maybe what you have on hand, or maybe something else that worked for you the last time you had it. And you know, magic's really a system, and it evolves. And I think part of the danger, what it really grew out of, especially in the African traditional religions, is the syncretism, which we were talking about before. You know, I think that, you know, like there were a lot of Chinese in Cuba. So they have this thing called the Karata China, which is this sort of dream system based on the Chinese numbers, and you do it and then you play the lottery and you make money. So there are a lot of blends like that, because they were around a lot of Chinese people. There were Chinese people at the rituals. They were at the Chinese people's homes. You know, there was a lot of give and take and things, and there seemed to be a blending. That's not the same thing as cultural appropriation. That's not what I'm talking about. Again, what I'm talking about is the things that really sticks in my thing, is where people are taking things that are probably wrong, and then they're turning around and selling that to somebody else. And that's what I really don't think is right. So I guess that's about all I have to say about that. I am going to continue doing workshops on it and dialogues at events that I am at, where any event organizer will let me.
Bringing Race to the Table was an excellent book. I would really like to recommend it to our audience. If you're looking for, you know, if this is an issue that's important to you, you want to know how to be more welcoming and respectful, please do read it.
Yeah, it was a really good book, you know. And I also want to challenge people of color. You know, the last couple of events I've done, I saw a really large number of people of color attending, but very few of them actually going and taking workshops from the people of color that were there. And that, I'm not saying they have to, but I'm saying for so long we fought to actually have representation. So it would be nice if we had some sort of community support, you know.
I hear that. Yep.
It's the same thing like you were saying with your classes. People don't want to pay for the stuff that's good, or people don't want to attend the stuff that's good. They want to attend the stuff that's quick or easy or flashy or gimmicky or something like that. And that's, you know, that's okay, sure. But what are you going to get? You get what you pay for. You know, you're going to get something that's of very little value. And when you need it, you're going to be sorry. You know, that's how I see it.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I thought of something related to, you know, the cultural context, the area you were discussing before, okay? 2010, I was at the Canadian National Pagan Conference, and this was the first time I'd been across the country. It was in Montreal, right? Now, Canada's a bilingual country, but we're not all bilingual, right? In the West, we tend to be very English, right? Mm-hmm. And there's more French as you get closer to Ontario, Quebec, right? And New Brunswick is very, I think New Brunswick hasn't figured out how to do bilingualism. I think the whole country should do it their way, right? But, okay, so I was in Montreal for the first time, and the theme was language to liturgy, right? Because maintaining French culture and French language is something that's very important to the people of Quebec and to Francophone Canadians throughout the country, right? It's a big deal. And there are concepts in a language that you have no equivalent for in another language, right? One example that I learned about is the French concept of courage, right? Courage, right? It's not the same. We get the word courage from it in English, but it's not the same thing, right? Because courage comes from cœur, which is heart, right? So it's more than just bravery. It's also about, you know, your enthusiasm, your dedication, your love for what you're doing and the people you're doing it with, right? It's a much bigger word and a bigger concept, right? So when you're learning a ritual system, right, or a system of magic, this is a language that you're learning, right? And so there's associations, right? There are greater contexts within the culture that you need to know, right? And even in Wicca, right? This goes back hundreds of years because it's based in the Western occult tradition, which we can date for a fact to the Renaissance. So, you know, it's been here at least 500 years. And so, and some of it's older because it was taken from Greek philosophical writing. So there's, you know, this is why you learn correspondence tables, right? They're boring. They're boring. It's like learning mathematical multiplication tables, right? It's dull. But then you learn the greater cultural context, right? Like we were remarking, it's been interesting how everybody's had an unfortunate kind of, like there's been some weird twists of luck and unexpected expenses have been going on the past little while.
Oh, yeah.
Right now, I just learned that Jupiter, I don't know if anybody's into astrology, but Jupiter has been retrograde since, I guess, March 7th. And okay, so if you're a magical person, you know right away, Jupiter is associated with career, success, luck, fortune, and spirituality, right? So, oh, okay, so that's why my hubby totaled my other car, you know, which actually did happen to me this week. So, yeah, right? But I don't know, I guess it's a bit of a tangent now, but you get the idea, right? There's a whole language, right? So I assume the same applies in the Afro-Caribbean traditions. There's centuries of tradition going on here and a cultural context. And just because you're lighting a gold candle, well, why are you lighting that gold candle? What does that symbolize? Who is that connected to? You know?
Oh yeah, definitely. You know, and I think you were right. You know, you mentioned how you had the altar for the Baron, you know, and I think that that's a good, if you're going to do something, make sure you're doing it in the most minimal and non, you know, offensive way possible. You know, I always tell people not to ask for things, you know, which is where a lot of these people who are culturally appropriating go horribly wrong. You know what I mean? It's not just that they're trying to, you know, I was having a conversation with a Haitian Mambo yesterday about drapeau, the voodoo flags, you know, and she was saying, you know, well, yes, you can sell them in a way that someone's going to hang them in their living room for artisanal purposes, and it's just going to be some sort of, you know, artistic thing for them, but that's not what it was designed for. But now there's a cultural context where it's allowed because basically people need money, you know what I mean? So if you're getting that kind of thing, then make sure you're buying it from someone in the community, somewhere that's, you know, sustainable, fair trade, all of those things, you know, which is, again, I think something that is lost on a lot of people. You know, oh, I can go out and make necklaces, I can go out and make flags, I can go out and, you know, make this other thing that you're going to be charging me all this money for. But the reason that there's all this money charged for it is because we're trying to give the money to the people who need it and deserve it, and it's part of their culture and they should be paid for it. You know, it's sad, but that's true, you know, and I feel that way about all people of color. And I've done a lot of work in my film work with, you know, Indigenous Australians, Aboriginal, I don't know, they don't like to be called Aborigines, but that's what most people call them. So, you know, and again, it's the same kind of thing. It's this culture theft and this commodification and them constantly struggling to try and get back their own voice, and people paying attention to this sensationalist media perspective as opposed to paying attention to them and their indigenous media creations, you know. So I think we really need to go out and make these choices and realize what it is we're doing with our money and our time and our attention and our energy and all of that, you know. So, but we'd love to hear what anybody else thinks.
Yeah, I think just a final thought on that one, right? Even if you're, you know, you're like, oh, well, this is just too much work, I don't want to, you know, I'll just avoid it, right, rather than get involved or whatever, right? Or if you're, you know, even if you're kind of like, well, people are too sensitive or whatever, you're, you know, because I've heard all these excuses, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, right? Even if you think all that, which I would argue with you about, okay, do you really want the wrong information? Right? Do you really want the wrong information? You know, you want to learn this stuff, right? You want to learn it. Do you want to learn it right, or do you want to learn it screwed up?
Oh, definitely. There's so much fake, you know, not real information that, again, could be dangerous. You know what I mean? There's so many things that I see online that are wrong. I saw today about some sort of hoodoo douches that look like they would give you some horrible, horrible down below kind of thing going on there. You know, I don't know what people are doing. It's insane. It's insane. I can't. you know, so. All right, well, that's it for this episode. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Please subscribe to my channel and Sable Aradia's channel and watch all the videos. Go back and watch them again and give us thumbs up and all of that stuff. Read
and feel
our
free
blogs.
to debate and, you know, ask questions and, you know, tell me that I'm an idiot if you really like. I probably will delete your comment, but I'll think about it.
Yeah. Respectfully tell us.
Yeah, tell me I'm wrong respectfully. I love debate. Yeah, that's
Sure.
great.
That sounds great. All right, so join in. We're going to be doing this every second Monday, and take care, everybody. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Yay.